This is the VOA Special English Technology Report. We recently told you about a website called pastpages.org. It saves the home pages of 70 news websites from around the world every hour. That report led us to look for a website that saves images of newspapers from around the world. We found today's front pages, a site operated by the Newseum. The Newseum is a museum of news reporting and the media in Washington, D.C. Paul Sparrow is Senior Vice President with the organization. He says, "One of the most interesting things about newspapers is that they are a snapshot in time. They capture a moment when the people working with a newspaper say, 'These are the most important stories affecting our community.'" Paul Sparrow says visitors to the Today's Front Pages website can choose to see all of its newspapers, or they can look only at newspapers from one area of the world, such as Asia, Africa, or South America. Visitors can also sort newspapers by alphabetic order, either by state or by country. Today's Front Pages does not archive or save front page images, but it does archive newspapers from historically important dates, such as November 5th, 2008. That was one day after Barack Obama was elected president. Paul Sparrow says readers can learn a lot from the historical newspapers in the Newseum's collection. He says they will get a better understanding of the culture that existed long ago. The website shows only the front pages of general interest newspapers that publish daily. Student newspapers are not displayed. Some newspapers are not included because they do not have the technological ability to send their front pages electronically to the Newseum, and others simply choose not to do so. The site displays the front pages of 836 newspapers from 93 countries. It warns that the front pages are in their original unedited form, and some may contain material that is deemed objectionable to some visitors. If you are in Washington, you can see many front pages from around the world on display inside and just outside the Newseum. Only about 10% of the front pages the Newseum receives every day are displayed, but all are available online. You can read and hear our reports online at voaspecialenglish.com. For VOA Special English, I'm Mario Ritter.
I'm Alex Villarreal with the VOA Special English Development Report. Week after week, we bring you stories about projects to improve lives in the developing world. Projects like banking by mobile phone, or low-cost lighting systems, or even a toilet bag that recycles itself into fertilizer. But for every success story, there are countless other projects that fail. These are the stories that people talk about at an event called Fail Fair. The creators of the event recently held their second Fail Fair. Members of the nonprofit community came together in Washington to talk about their projects and why they failed. Failfare is sort of like a celebration of failure. A prize is even given to the best worst story. But why celebrate? Katrine Verklas is with a nonprofit group in New York called Mobile Active. She was the one with the idea for Failfare. She says the event provides an opportunity for people to learn from the mistakes of others. She says development is a field with finite resources, and so the less money we waste, the better. And part of that is learning from the things that didn't work so that we don't endlessly repeat them. Mobile Active held its first Failfare in New York earlier this year. More than 70 people attended the event. One of them, for example, was there to talk about his failed nonprofit organization, mobileimpact.org. Bradford Frost had hoped to recycle used cell phones and provide them to people in Africa. Katrine Verklas explained some of the problems with this project and others like it. She says it did not work at all because of the numbers of very inexpensive handsets in the countries. She says they call that pseudo, stuff we don't want. Failfare takes place in a lighthearted social setting over food and drinks. Ms. Verklas says the creator of a project is the one responsible for declaring it a failure. She says profit-making businesses talk more about failure than nonprofit organizations do. She says, we have to report to donors, and donors do not like to look bad. And so we don't like to look bad as nonprofits. And so we have a tendency to highlight our successes and never talk about our failures. Katrine Verklas says she hopes Failfare will change this problem over time. She says members of the nonprofit community have been surprisingly open to her idea. For VOA Special English, I'm Alex Villarreal. Transcripts and MP3s of our reports are at voaspecialenglish.com.
From VOA Learning English, this is the Technology Report. Many sports competitions use cameras to help officials make the right call. Now, goal line technology is being used in international soccer. The move to goal line technology follows international pressure on football's governing body, FIFA, after a missed call in the 2010 World Cup. Video replays of a game clearly showed that England's Frank Lampard had scored a goal against Germany. However, that goal was denied because neither the referee nor the linesman saw the ball cross the goal line. The incident caused such an outcry that FIFA approved the development of goal line technology. That technology was used at the Confederations Cup in Brazil in June. Bjorn Linder is the chairman of Goal Control, the German-based company that won the goal line technology contract for this year's Confederations Cup. His team spent weeks in Brazil before the games as part of the FIFA certification process. He says the system has 14 cameras connected to a computer. Computers track the path of the ball in real time and reconstruct the play. The system sends a signal to the referees through their watches when it finds that the ball has crossed the goal line. Electronic eyes on the goal line may settle arguments, but the data is still only a reconstruction of reality. Goal control claims an accuracy of plus or minus 5 millimeters. This is well below FIFA's minimum requirement of plus or minus 3 centimeters. Goal line technology may become a central part of the sport. But it is still the referee, not the computer, that makes the final call. For VOA Learning English, I'm Mario Ritter.
This is the VOA Special English Technology Report. This year is the 75th anniversary of the Golden Gate Bridge in California. It opened to vehicle traffic on May 28, 1937. Since then, more than 2 billion vehicles have crossed the world-famous bridge linking San Francisco and Marin County. The bridge is named after the Golden Gate Strait. That narrow passage of water connects San Francisco Bay to the Pacific Ocean. The Golden Gate Bridge had the longest suspension span in the world at the time it was built. The suspended roadway stretches 1,280 meters between the bridge's 2 tall towers. Today, the Golden Gate still rates among the 10 longest bridge spans. Mary Curry works for the Golden Gate Bridge, Highway, and Transportation District. She says the bridge represents one of the most extraordinary engineering projects of all time. She calls it an engineering marvel and says it gets award after award for what it means in civil engineering and structural engineering. She says the Golden Gate Bridge is also a place where things happen first. For example, it was the first suspension bridge to have to change the roadway deck. The bridge is 27 meters wide and 2,788 meters long. 2 large cables pass over the top of the bridge's towers. These structures stand 227 meters above the water and 152 meters above the road. Each cable holds more than 27,500 strands of wire. 250 pairs of vertical suspender ropes connect the support cables to the suspension bridge. This is part of what enables the bridge to move up and down by nearly 5 meters. The project took 4 years to complete. Work began in 1933. The Golden Gate Bridge weighed more than 800,000 metric tons when it was completed. The San Francisco Chronicle newspaper called it a $35 million steel harp. Joseph Strauss was the chief engineer of the Golden Gate Bridge project. But architect Irving Murrow gets credit for its bright orange color, known as international orange. The Navy wanted the bridge painted in yellow and black. The Air Force had suggested red and white. But Mary Curry says Irving Murrow knew that orange would blend with the environment. It would contrast with the ocean and the air above. And it would also allow the Art Deco styling to really stand out. For VOA Special English, I'm
This
Carolyn
is the
Presutti.
VOA Special English Technology Report. Privacy activists are concerned about Google's new privacy policy as of March 1st. The company says one main policy is replacing more than 60 separate policies for different products. Activists say the changes will make it easier to track the activities of users across Google's many products, from Gmail to YouTube. Mark Rotenberg heads the Electronic Privacy Information Center in Washington. He says Google's aim is to create a single unified profile of its users. We believe that not only is that a threat to privacy, we actually believe it is illegal because last year Google entered into an agreement with the U.S. Federal Trade Commission in which they said they would not engage in that kind of data sharing without the explicit permission of their users. Google says its new policy will make it simpler for users to share information across services like Google Search, Gmail, and Google Calendar. And it says the new policy will help personalize each user's experience. Over time, it says users can expect to see better search results, fewer unwanted advertisements, and more content targeted to their interests. But Mark Rotenberg says, in return, people who choose to use Google will lose control over the information they share. The type of information you might provide for an email service, for example, such as your address book, is different from the type of information that you might provide for a social network service. Mr. Rotenberg says these two kinds of services should be kept separate. In our view, Google is actually undermining a very well-established expectation of privacy, particularly for popular internet services like electronic mail. Critics also see a bigger problem with Google's new policy. The plan would not give users a choice to opt out of the data sharing. Mr. Rotenberg says, in our view, if people want to make their personal information available, they certainly should have the right to do that. What we're objecting to is the effort by the company to take away from the users that choice that they should have. Google says it will not be collecting any more data than it does now. And it says users will still be able to control many privacy settings. For example, they can disable their search history and set Gmail chat to off the record. European Union officials have asked the company to delay the new policy to make sure it would not violate any EU data protection laws. For VOA Special English, I'm Mario Ritter with the VOA Special English Technology Report. A shortwave radio might seem like ancient technology these days, but for some people it remains their only link to the wider world. Ears to Our World is an organization based in the United States. It provides shortwave radios to schools and communities in some of the poorest areas of the world. The radio is small, about the size of a book, and self-powered. Users turn a crank. Winding it for 2 minutes provides about 40 minutes of listening time. Ears to Our World is supported by private donations and partners including Eton, the company that makes the Eton Grundig radios. Thomas Witherspoon started Ears to Our World in 2008. He said, "Our radios are going to people who have no other source of international news and information. It's hard for them to learn new languages and be connected to the bigger world." He said teachers use this information in the classroom to help students learn about the world around them. Ears to Our World works with local organizations to get the radios to where they are needed most. Mr. Witherspoon says the radios are now in 11 communities, most of them in Africa. He says many of these communities are unable to get information any other way. He takes the radios to parts of the world that lack access to the internet or to a national power grid of any kind. These include communities and villages in South Sudan, where people do not have power in their homes. Thomas Witherspoon says information is the most important tool to improve the lives of poor people. The self-powered radios are also useful in emergencies. Teachers in Haiti used them to get information after last year's earthquake. Mr. Witherspoon says Ears to Our World has sent out about 1,200 radios. More than half have gone to earthquake victims, mostly in Haiti. About 500 have gone to individual teachers and schools. More recently, Ears to Our World worked to bring the radios to children with vision problems in Belize. He said having a radio that they can control and listen to and search around on, it just opens a world of information to them. For VOA Special English, I'm Mario Ritter. You can read and listen to all of our reports at voaspecialenglish.com. You can also join us on Facebook at VOA
I'm Alex
Learning
Villarreal
English.
with the VOA Special English Technology Report. In January, a 5-day internet shutdown in Egypt failed to stop the protests that forced President Hosni Mubarak to resign. But it raised a technical question. Just how were Egyptian officials able to shut down internet service in their country? Craig Labovitz is chief scientist at Arbor Networks, an internet security company in the American state of Michigan. Mr. Labovitz says the internet is not as indestructible as people might think. He says there are points where the flow of computer traffic can be restricted. Mr. Labovitz says his researchers tracked the internet shutdown in Egypt as it was being carried out. He explains that in Egypt, internet users connect to the outside world through a small number of providers with international links. He said there are 100 or more providers within the country, domestic providers. But there really are only 4 providers that have links to the external world. And there are an even smaller number of data centers where the fiber optics cross Egypt. So only a handful of machines need to be shut down to have this kind of disruption. News reports suggested that the fiber optic links for those networks are all housed in the same building. Could a similar internet shutdown take place in the United States? Craig Labovitz says that is less of a possibility because of a larger number of internet providers and data centers. Still, the recent shutdown in Egypt has raised new concerns about a proposal in the United States Congress. Critics say the legislation could make similar action possible in America. The measure is known as the Protecting Cyberspace as a National Asset Act. Senator Joseph Lieberman of Connecticut first proposed the bill last June. Supporters say it would help protect the country's economic and national security from cyber attack. It would give the president the emergency power to shut down or seize parts of the nation's internet in the event of a major threat. Critics say the bill would give the president too much power. Some people call it the kill switch bill, an easy way to shut off the internet. They say the government could use it to censor the web and control the flow of information. For VOA Special English, I'm Alex Villarreal. Transcripts, MP3s, and podcasts of our reports are at voaspecialenglish.com. And we're on Facebook at VOA Learning English.
Paul Sparrow is Senior Vice President with the organization. He says, one of the most interesting things about newspapers is that they are a snapshot in time. They capture a moment when the people working with a newspaper say, these are the most important stories affecting our community. Paul Sparrow says visitors to the Today's Front Pages website can choose to see all of its newspapers, or they can look only at newspapers from one area of the world, such as Asia, Africa, or South America. This is the VOA Special English Technology Report. We recently told you about a website called pastpages.org. It saves the home pages of 70 news websites from around the world every hour. That report led us to look for a website that saves images of newspapers from around the world. We found Today's Front Pages, a site operated by the Newseum. The Newseum is a museum of news reporting and the media in Washington, D.C. Some may contain material that is deemed objectionable to some visitors. If you are in Washington, you can see many front pages from around the world on display inside and just outside the Newseum. Only about 10% of the front pages the Newseum receives every day are displayed, but all are available online. You can read and hear our reports online at voaspecialenglish.com. For VOA Special English, I'm Mario Ritter. Visitors can also sort newspapers by alphabetic order, either by state or by country. Today's Front Pages does not archive or save front page images, but it does archive newspapers from historically important dates such as November 5th, 2008. That was one day after Barack Obama was elected president. Paul Sparrow says readers can learn a lot from the historical newspapers in the museum's collection. He says they will get a better understanding of the culture that existed long ago. The website shows only the front pages of general interest newspapers that publish daily. Student newspapers are not displayed. Some newspapers are not included because they do not have the technological ability to send their front pages electronically to the museum, and others simply choose not to do so. The site displays the front pages of 836 newspapers from 93 countries. It warns that the front pages are in their original unedited form, and